Hello, welcome everybody. This is Grandmaster Alex Lenderman, and in this video, we're going to be starting a new topic, and it's going to be about hanging pawns. So we did some stuff on isolated pawn. Now we're going to do stuff on hanging pawns, and I want to show you guys a very nice example by Rozovayev. And we start off with the normal kind of thing. Also, of course, this is called a semi-tarash. There's also the move e4. Knight takes, pawn takes, but in this game e3 was played. After e3, knight c6, bishop c4 was played, also bishop d3 was possible, and black took, bishop e7, castles, and now white went back bishop d3. So I guess there's some kind of a detail here, because if white goes bishop d3 straight away, and then this, I guess it's a little bit more difficult for white to make progress. But the bishop c4 practically forces cd, because bishop e7 would run into this kind of an idea, basically winning the pawn. So that's the purpose. So therefore, in this position, we got this position, and then white lost the tempo in order to kind of force cd. So now, in this position, black maybe could also play knight f6, and then, well, h4 here wouldn't work, of course, because the knight is protecting the square really well. But in this case, black took on c3, bc, and now we get a hanging pawns position. So the difference is that now we have these two connected pawns, and the reason they're called hanging is because it's like they're protecting each other, but they can't really be very well protected. So as of right now, the c3 pawn is backward. When the c3 pawn moves, the d4 pawn becomes a little bit weak. When the d4 pawn moves, the c4 pawn becomes a little bit weak. So as you could see, there's no pawn on the b file and there's no pawn on the e file, so they're still separated. So there's still a little bit of a weakness, but it's a little bit more of a dynamic weakness because they're more dynamic, they're more mobile in some ways. And we'll see that more in future examples. But here, black did something which is not always very advisable. He traded one of the defending knights. And we'll see that it leads to a very interesting idea for white. So black played b6, and now rook e1 was played, bishop e7, and now it's pretty clear d5 just will not work, because black will just take with the queen, and so d5 is really not on the cards in this position. What else can white play? White can try rook e3, but then after rook c8, black's gonna get quick counterplay, knight a5, knight c4, and black's gonna try to play for a blockade. White can also try to move c4, but then after bishop f6, black's gonna get a lot of counterplay on the d4 pawn, and now even d5 is not possible because of the rook on a1 hanging. So therefore, white played this very strong move h4, and now the fact of the matter is, because black took knight takes c3, and the f6 knight is now gone, white has good prospects to really do a lot of damage on the h7 square. And this was a very unique, interesting idea that Rozovayev has came up with, and it's been used ever since. Black played knight a5. If black tries bishop takes h4, white would take, play rook e3 with the idea of rook h3, and with a very big initiative. So black played knight a5, and the idea is, again, to try to control these two squares. White played knight g5. Okay, probably g6 was lesser of the evil, although after queen g4, white has still a very big initiative. But in the game, h6 was played. And now, I'm going to give you guys some time to try to see if you can find it. What should white play here? What attacking move really powers white attack? So of course, white does not want to go back here. White played a very strong move, queen h5. Taking is impossible because of queen h7 mate. Just to show you. So black played bishop d5, trying to build a blockade. But here in this case, it's too slow because white plays a powerful move, knight h7, exclam. Attacking the rook, and after the rook moves, bishop takes h6. That's really the point. And then the rook comes over, making a rook lift, and white really has a big attack. f5 is practically forced to block the bishop, so let's say black would play a null move. The idea for white was, besides knight g5, also one mating pattern which everybody should know is this: bishop h7, bishop g6, queen takes f7. So that's why black had to play f5, blocking the bishop. But now after rook e3, white has too big of an attack. Rook g3, another very strong move. Black has to take the rook, otherwise it's mate on g7. Queen g6 check, and knight f6, threatening mates from both h6 and h7 square, and black has nothing better than to basically give up the queen. Now you still have to be careful, because king takes h2 would be a huge mistake, because now black's going to be able to bring his defenses together. So it's very important to play king h1 first. But now after queen takes f6, queen takes f6, king g8, king takes h2, rook c8, rook h1. Of course, white's up material and he's going to have a decisive attack, taking away an exit square on e7. And of course, white wins easily. He's going to win the rook, and black resigned here. So as you could see, one drawback of the hanging pawns, especially when you get rid of your nice defender, is that this h4, knight g5 idea suddenly comes to fruition, which with the knight on f6, that idea would not be in the cards. Now we're going to look at another attacking idea. And this game is a famous game between Nimzovich and Tarash. Two old classics. Not world champions, but basically top masters at that level. Tarash played his favorite Tarash defense before it became more popular. This is the Tarash defense, and in this game, white played e3. C takes d5 is, of course, the main line. And then g3, or maybe other moves. But in this game, white just simply wanted to play chess. White wanted to play a simple setup, and so does black. So far, both sides are developing their pieces normally. But now, white decides to go for a hanging pawns position. Now, probably, he should have just taken on c5 and played a3 and, played this more or less equal position. But instead, he played this move knight h4, which it turned out to be a loss of a tempo and turned out to be just not very effective. Because after black played g6 stopping knight f5, white ended up going backwards. And on one hand, it seems like it's useful to get black to play g6 because maybe there's more potential for that bishop. But in reality, it's not much of a factor here, and black actually gained the time to bring his forces together to really get a very nice initiative. And now white takes and plays bishop b5. But that might be already losing a bit too much time, because now black gets a knight e4. And again, I wanted to show you examples from both sides, of course. Takes, queen c2, and now black crashes through. Takes, and once again, the same kind of an idea that works in the isolated pawn positions, it also works in hanging pawn positions. So I'm going to give you guys some time to try to see if you can find the idea. What do you think black should play? d4, exclam. And the idea is a very interesting idea. It's a familiar pattern. It could be a familiar pattern to a lot of you guys, but if you've never seen it before, you can pause your videos and try to see if you can find it on your own. So black to play and get a very decisive attack. Bishop takes h2, very strong idea. Bishop takes g2 would also work. The idea is double bishop sacrifice. Mate is threatened on h1. Now, has to be stopped. So king takes g2 would be bad because of queen g4 check first. And now rook d5 followed by mate on h5. So that's simple enough. So that cannot work. So white has to play f3. And now black has to play still precisely, because if black plays not carefully, the attack could be not as effective. So bishop takes f1 would not be so effective, because after knight takes f1, white can still hope for a successful defense after queen h2, king h1, and there's no immediate win. That's why a strong move is rook f8, bringing that rook in the game, not rushing with recouping the material, because white is pretty helpless. Black's idea is simply to go rook e2, followed by queen h1, and really white is in lots of trouble. So white played knight e4, check, but now the idea is rook takes f1 would run into queen h2, winning the queen, and knight f6 check would run into king h8. And again, there's going to be queen g2 threat, which forces rook takes f1 and black wins the queen. So knight e4, queen h1, king g2, bishop takes f1, and white had to play d5, f5, and queen c3. So white had to go for desperate complications. Now, on first glance, it seems that white's doing really well, but in fact, black has it all controlled. Queen g2 check, king e3 only move. Takes, and now f4. And now it's going to be a very nice forced sequence. Takes is forced, rook f8. Now king e3 or queen e2 would be made, so king e5 is forced. And now king hunt, queen h2, king e6. And again, if you give white a move, white has the mate threats. Of course, in this case, after rook e8, king d7, black mates first with this bishop. As you could see, similar ideas as an isolated pawn, the hanging pawns also have some ideas like that. And I wanted to show you guys this idea of the double bishop sacrifice, which can sometimes occur in positions like that, especially with two open bishops. So that's why don't allow your opponent to have such bishops unopposed. One more game that I wanted to show you in this video is the very nice game by Nimzovich. And this game shows that sometimes you can also play these hanging pawns in a very positional way. So d4, d5, knight f3, e6. And Nimzovich in this case also plays the Tarrasch defense. And white played bishop f4, which is not the most effective move. D takes c5 or g3 are more promising. cd, knight takes d4, bishop b4. Knight db5 would be interesting. White just plays solid chess. And he's playing Rubinstein, which is a very famous player. And here maybe knight takes e6 isn't as good because the bishop on f4 could potentially be misplaced. So takes, bishop d3, and castles, bishop d6. And now the idea is black's actually preparing this idea of c5. So even though black's not going to get much of an attack because pieces get traded off, but as you could see, you can also play with hanging pawns in a positional way. And we'll see a very interesting concept here of self-blockade. Bishop g5 would run into rook b8, by the way. That's why bishop g3 was played. Takes. And now c5. So, as of right now, these pawns seem quite weak. And normally with hanging pawns, the rules are the same. The side who has hanging pawns usually don't want to trade off pieces. And usually he doesn't want to leave them unprotected because they could be eventually attacked. But as you could see, it's not always the case. Sometimes they could be just as fine because they can create a weakness for opponent as well. And here white played rook c1, bishop e6, and here white played queen a4, queen b6, and queen a3. So at some point, white should have probably played b3, stopping this future idea by black. But basically, the thing is, probably white was not aware of this idea because at first it seems absurd, and I'll show you what I mean. And by the way, in the next video, we'll see a nice example where white actually won a similar game like this after playing b3, stopping black's idea. But anyway, here the idea is black plays c4. So he's killing his bishop on e6, more or less, and he's also making the d5 pawn backward and forever weak. And he's advancing the c4 pawn, which can't really be touched. It's blockaded by the knight, so everything seems great for white, right? But there's one problem. The b2 pawn is weak, the queen is misplaced on a3, and as you'll see, black actually is doing quite well here, and it's enough for equality. And white thought he's still better here, because he's gonna go rook d4 and soon put pressure on the d5 square, and he thought black's gonna be in trouble. But the problem is, after queen b4, rook d4, black does not want to trade, give him double pawns, because after this, there's not going to be any targets, and white would be better. So that's why the idea is defending d5, but also keeping an eye on this key b2 pawn weakness. So therefore, knight b1 had to be played. Well, maybe rook 1 d2 was more solid with equality. But instead, knight b1 was played, so white's trying to play for a win, but I think he's overestimating his position. And after now, black shifts gears, rook b8, now the d5 square is unprotected, rook d2, and now black makes a transition, because now white's forced to take with the knight, the b2 pawn is still weak, and now black played king f8, just bringing the king in the game, e4, and now that's a mistake, because he's basically opening up the center and going for complications with still a very bad knight on a3. And because of that, he ends up suffering. And in fact, this position is already quite bad. And he should still play bishop c6, preventing knight a4 with a playable game. Slightly worse, but still playable. But instead, he played rook d4, and he must have just miscalculated something, because after rook b4, he just transposed into the slowest endgame, and now bishop c4, important move, not allowing the king to get in, and therefore black has time to bring the king on c5 before white gets the king on d4, and the rest of this game is a mop-up, because really the pawn on the a file is too strong, the knight can't really guard it, and then white's just going to be in zugzwang. White's actually not even going to be able to sacrifice the knight for the pawn, not that it would help anyway. So I just wanted to show you guys this interesting self-blockading idea by Nimzovich, where you would think that d5 pawn is weak, backward, left behind, just easy to attack, but because of the fact that the b2 pawn can also be weak in this self-blockading manner, this actually compensates. And also black's pieces were all very active, and the bishop on e6, despite its passivity, it was a very solid piece and kept everything under control. And you see later on, it became the hero of the game. So as you could see, hanging pawns can be a plus both in a positional way and in an attacking way. So this video was about showing the pluses of hanging pawns, and the next video will be showing drawbacks of hanging pawns and showing examples of how you can play against hanging pawns. So thanks everybody for watching this video. This is Grandmaster Alex Lenderman signing off, and I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and looking forward to showing you the next videos. Take care. Bye-bye.